Well, I will call the meeting of the Ramsey County Home Rule Charter Committee to order. The first order of business is to approve the minutes from last meeting. Is there any discussion of the minutes? Okay, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second to approve the minutes. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Next item of business on the agenda is to approve the agenda. Are there any revisions or changes that we need to make to the agenda?
I would like to address the thing when we get to it.
Is there something that you'd like to add, Rodney?
No, I want to just talk about it,
Okay.
whenever that fits.
Okay.
But
Are there any
before
other?
it gets too far down the agenda.
Rodney wants to talk about the charter, I think.
Sure. Okay. Are there any other things that we need to add or change with respect to the agenda?
I move that we accept it as it is.
Okay, there's a motion to approve the agenda. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Hearing none, motion carries. The next article, or the next item on the agenda is to review Article 9. Rodney, is this what you want to discuss?
I want to talk before we get to 9.
Okay,
Right now.
please talk then.
Okay, members of the committee, at this time, I have thoughts about this thing. For one thing, the charter is too long. We don't have time to cover it all, to get it before, to give it a good, thorough process. And that I would just like to have this stopped here at this time for further discussion.
Stop what, Rodney?
The charter.
Stop drafting the charter?
Yes,
Or-
yes.
And your thoughts on it is that it's too long?
It's too long and I cannot support it.
Okay. Are there any other thoughts on?
I think I will, I've had some people come up to me and talk about the proposed charter as it stands now. I think one of the big concerns, at least from people that I've been talking to, is specifically Article 4, which talks about changing elected offices and things like that. And that, I think, the concern has been approached by, right now we have the rights to vote, you know, A, B, C, D, E, and F, and if we adopt this charter and make it a possibility of an appointment versus an election, we're losing out on that ability to have our say. So that's one concern on the election, Article 4 piece that I've heard about.
Okay.
And as for, you know, I think for the length, it is, I think it's 6 pages if I recall correctly, 6 or 7 pages. There's a lot of articles in there, and as we all know, home rule powers, they can be, you can pick and choose what you want to proceed with and what you don't want to proceed with. It's not an all or nothing approach to governance. So I recognize that, Rodney, that you have that concern with all of the, you know, we go through the financial, and we go through the referendums, and we go through the election, and we go through budgeting, and we go through this, and we go through that. I think the concern is that it is so lengthy, and so, it's not a whole lot of legalese, but it's enough of legalese that the average person sitting down trying to understand, should we vote yes or should we vote no on this, that they're going to get lost maybe in the length of it and all the different provisions. So I think that's a valid concern for proposing any type of thing, but those are kind of the thoughts I've heard from people that have come up and kind of talked to me a little bit about it.
Okay. Was the sentiment that the intention of the document is to change the status of elected officials?
I believe that's a fear on the part of some people. I believe it is a fear on the
Yep.
part of some people, that you have an elected position today, in 2 years from now, a year from now, 5 years from now, wherever, that ability of the people to go in and vote for that elected position will be gone because now it will be an appointed one. So I think it's a fear of people.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so you feel, Rodney, in your view, that that is cause to basically jettison the entire document?
Well, I think we can scrutinize it. I guess I have two things that I think that should be in this document that's pretty important. And it's on that sheet that you passed out at the first one of those informational meetings. There's three things on there, and the second one, I can understand. The first one is the control of the highway system and all that. The second one is the budget. I can understand that the tool that you need to do, and I'm not 100% on this mill levy deal, but I've got a good understanding because I've worked with the township and different things. I think that should be put in there so that you have the authority to move those funds around in each whatever needed, because I've sat here for 20 years at these county commissioner meetings. I know what goes on between here and there, and if they can move those figures around, or those funds around, I should say, not figures, but funds, that would be beneficial. And the second is that I think we want to do is to put, have it so that you can put a sales tax on something if need, but it's got to be by the vote of the people and a time set for the limit on how long it goes.
Okay. That's fine, but any tax that we would ever want to levy would have to go to a vote of the people. There's no ability of the commission to just institute a tax.
But I don't think we have that in there.
That's in century code.
So I guess I'd like to see those two things. That would be what I would put on the ballot. That would be it. Because I don't think we want anything any longer than that. I've seen too many elections with too much to read, and they've been voted down. And I don't want to be one that's going to be on a committee that have something like this voted down. We've worked hard on it, yes, but there's things that bother me that we can't go with.
Okay. I guess in a principled manner, I actually just disagree with you down the line, which is this. I want to write the right document for this community, and if this community chooses not to adopt it, then at least we did the right document. To me, the outcome of the vote is almost irrelevant. The work that we're putting in here is to ensure that in the future, if it doesn't pass this time around, if it needs to come back up, which I expect that it will, that they have a basis, just like we did in the 1992 document, to ground their discussions and what had been done in the past. If the fear is that the document is too long, or that you don't feel that there should be a provision with respect to changing the status of elected officials, I think that that's a very reasonable discussion to have. And my argument for having it be allowable is because we don't know how to predict everything that could happen in the future, and there may come a time when they may need to look at that. And that's the only reason we put it in. If it's the will of this committee to have that removed, I think that that's fine. And with respect to your last point, which is the length of the document, my fear is that if you can't get somebody to read 7 pages of the document, then what can you get them to do? I mean, this is something that we want to be expansive. We want it to cover what can happen and what can't happen in the county. And if we write a document that does not cover how the county should proceed to govern itself, I think we're doing ourselves a disservice. But that's my view. So I respect yours and thank you for sharing it. I just wanted to share mine as well.
I guess my views on it are how it stands right now. I don't think we're putting into place a document that is going to pass.
Okay.
Just in my own personal conversations with people in the community, I think we are getting a little too detailed, maybe, in a lot of these aspects. And I talked with Rodney at length one day a couple of weeks ago, and he's got some very valid points, I think. I would also agree that maybe we start small with a couple of these major points where, you know, it gives the ability to go to a sales tax if needed. for a vote later on down the road, whether it be for a jail or what have you, and give the commission a little bit more of a leeway with the mills and budgeting and moving some money around as needed. But I would agree that maybe we should look at maybe taking some of the items out. And I think there's a fear that is out there that we may need to look at as well, where, you know, the city residents, even though they're also in the county, the city of Devils Lake, with some of these resolutions and ordinances and whatever, I think there's a fear in some of our outlying communities and people that they may be overridden or so forth later on down the road because, you know, the city might want something, but it might not. The city residents in our county might want something that our outlying citizens might not want. If that makes sense.
Sure, as a point of clarification, my understanding is that the voters of the city of Devils Lake outweigh the entirety of the rest of the county. And so and that's not the point that I'm making. The point that I'm making is, as it stands right now under current law, you could potentially have every single county commissioner be elected by only the citizens of Devils Lake from amongst themselves. And then how is that different than what we have or what we're proposing? My thoughts are that by having the ability to initiate and have a referendum through a number of signatures, the people that are in the outlying communities would have the ability to have a say, to have their voices heard. Because potentially you are, and especially as these outlying regions dry out more and more of the voters are in and around Devils Lake or share the interests of the city of Devils Lake, I think that you are going to see continued degradation of the areas from which county commissioners are elected, meaning that they'll be elected from the city or their surrounding areas more and more. So that's my fear. And so I guess I've heard that as well, and that was brought up at the township meeting, but I'm not sure that I think that that's any different than what exists now. It's just that right now there are more steps, right? So in other words, you could end up with a tyranny of Devils Lake anyway. It just means that you have to have commissioners be elected from Devils Lake. Does that make sense?
Yep, but I also think we need to take a hard look at, for instance, Morton County and Burley County, you know, with the less is more approach. Morton County had theirs passed by 50.1% of the vote for their home rule, which had a lot of different entities in it. Burley County, who basically went after a sales tax for their jail, passed by 66%. So I think that's something to take into consideration too. You know, how advanced do we want to be in this?
Well, I guess to me that's a question of, do we want to do what's right or what's popular? And I don't know.
But, well, right, I totally agree that there's a do what's right and do what's popular, but I can tell you that where we're standing right now, I'm pretty sure it's not going to pass.
Okay.
So I think we need to take a hard look at some of the items, especially the election article. I'd like to also take a look at that and maybe have that removed.
Okay.
I think everybody has got some valid points who's spoken so far. I think that, Lucas, I believe I understand where you're coming from. I don't know that I agree that Rodney's idea was as you stated it. I think if I understand Rodney correctly, he supports a charter with those specific pieces, but not the rest of the verbiage. So I don't think Rodney's decision is based on he's feeling he doesn't want his name on something that's not going to pass. I think he personally believes in some of the provisions, but not the others. As for your, you know, theoretically, I'd love to see everybody who's a voter, who has the right to vote, to sit down and to read a 7-page document. That's an ideal that I hope we all get to someday. It's not been my experience as a reality in most any fashion, regardless of how important the issue is. People pay attention to things that they understand that they impact them. And if you're not going to take the time to read through the 7 pages, they're not going to be invested in looking at it one way or the other, probably. And maybe that's a sad thing to come out and say or whatever, but it is the reality. I open up a newspaper every day and I read what interests me. what impacts me. I don't look at the other areas so much. I think firmly, personally, Article 4 is not an article that I would support, because I firmly believe that someday down the road, 20 years from now, you might be in a position where you need that, then you can add it to your charter. I believe in the election process, and I believe that anytime we give up a seat in any fashion, we lose some voices that really matter. I really believe that. That's my own personal belief. But just because I have a personal belief on Article 4 doesn't mean I can't support the process and say here's a charter that we have drafted and goes forward to the people to vote on it, because it's people's right to vote on it. If they want it, they want it. If they don't, they don't. But when you're looking at a big governance change, sometimes baby steps might be smarter, and sometimes maybe not. I don't know how the populace of Ramsey County will feel about all the provisions in here. That's not my specialty to kind of, guess that less is more or more is less, and all those things.
You're not doing any tracking polls or anything?
No, I'm not doing any tracking polls. Ramsey County is 11,000 some people, and I think the city of Devils Lake certainly has most of the population, but I have certainly seen a lot of the outlying communities band together and say, no, we're not doing it, and boy, you get a lot more than the poll than the citizens of the city. So I think everybody has valid points.
Sure.
And I appreciate yours, because I think that this willingness to look at a new way of governance is a good idea. So I support some of the articles more so than the other ones, but process, we're drafting it, and one way or the other we'll have something maybe at the end.
So the 2 points that I want to make, and I don't want to give off the impression that it's Lucas Wakefield versus the committee, because I don't believe that that's true. First one is this. I'm getting the sense that there's this sentiment that I want to strip elected officials of their elected status. I have no interest in doing so. I would be fine if Ramsey County continued into the unseen future, having everyone be elected. I believe also in the elected process. But I also think that it's impossible to predict every future. And I take your point very well, Carrie, which is it could be added in the future, and that is true. And it could be, and maybe that's good enough reason to strip it from the document. I just wanted to write a document that does not need to be revisited every 5 or 10 years to be updated, but one that can hold for most possible futures, what we can see coming down the road, and allow us the flexibility to deal with that. And so that's the first point. The second point is a procedural one, which was initially when we set down this road of drafting an initial draft, I wanted it to be that, an initial draft that we could then revisit, and at that point, once we had it down so we were all on the same page on what we were talking about, to revisit and say, then what do we want to remove or what do we feel won't work? Part of my fear is that as more and more of the people in the community, which they have every right to be involved, are involved, basically it's stopping the process of us finishing a document that we can then go back and refine. There may very well be many portions of this initial draft that need to be stripped or changed or added to, but until we have a finished document that we can then look back and write better, I think it'll be challenging. But that's a procedural question, and if the committee disagrees with me, then that's fine. Obviously, we'll follow the will of the committee.
I guess my question at this moment is, to Rodney's point, are we really considering a tactical change here as far as how to get this into law, or are we considering a more paradigm shift in terms of our governance? So is this just something that we're going to take baby steps to move along, or are we revamping what we as a committee believe as should be the future path forward, or the long-term goal? Because I've heard kind of both echoed today. On one hand, it's, yeah, we'll do this piecemeal, do little bits at a time. The other part that I've heard though is that, no, once we get this finished, you know, parts 1 and 2, what Rodney had referenced, is then it's done, that's it. And that's where I'm just a little fuzzy on, as far as what are we actually changing here? Because if we're gonna move forward and say this is a paradigm shift, then yes, this is the time to do that. But if this is a tactical change, where we're gonna do it piecemeal versus all at once, then let's finish the document first and figure out what to change or move or postpone until later.
Members of the committee that haven't spoken, or Rodney, go ahead.
I believe we're at the point where we've got to have some document that we've got timeline to meet here to get this thing done. It's gonna be a busy season pretty quick. Everybody isn't gonna have time to spend like we've spent 2.5 hours the last 5 months to finish this. And that's why I asked that we give this a little more consideration on dropping some of these things. And let's go small. We don't need to do the whole thing. This has been run this way for a long time since statehood. Why can't we run it now? We are changing. We've got a few things that we can do. Let's do it.
Other members of the committee?
You know, if you read back in what they done in 2000 and some of those, and I respect some of those people, and when they got, I think when their charter that they were writing at that time, when they got about this far, there was one lady that wrote in there and said she could no longer support it, and it was disbanded. And I'm at almost that point myself right now. I can't support this totally. I know it's hard to take, but it's hard to take the other side too, Lucas.
So maybe back to my question, Rodney. Is it a lack of support in principle or in tactics? As far as just now it's the wrong time, or is it, no, this is the wrong way to govern ourselves?
I'm thinking this is the wrong way to govern ourselves,
Okay.
Anthony.
I respect that view, and I appreciate you sharing it. And while it may not be shared by me, it needs to be spoken.
Well, I guess I've tried to speak my piece, but I guess I've used other examples of different, when we've been talking some of this, and it's hard when you take something to an election. I don't care. Just take, for instance, what's happened here, right here in Devil's Lake. They can't pass a thing for the school, and they haven't been able to pass a fitness center. Now we're trying to change the laws of Ramsey County. I don't think we can do that with this article, the way it is written. It's too long, and like I said, we've got to shorten it up. I'd like to see some of the others speak up.
I'm still processing. Takes me a while sometimes to wrap my head around all the different comments.
Rodney, to be clear, just so I understand, the articles that you support, which ones are they?
Well, it would be on that home rule sheet that they passed out for the meetings that was held out there at City Plaza. Those 2 informational meetings. Terry?
Yeah, you like the highway control,
Yes?
the ability to budget with moving the mill levies around if necessary, so we have that ability. And you
Yes.
also like the idea of putting in an option so you can ask for a sales tax in a specified situation.
Yes.
Those
Under-
3 kind of main points, and then some,
It's got to be written in what time length and things like that.
With specific, okay.
Yes.
Okay.
And I don't think I'm out of reason in reasoning that.
No, I don't think you are either. I mean, there's gonna be disagreements on everything, I think, on how we, think things should work, and that's fine. I keep hearkening back in my mind to the idea of, we talk about how a home rule is kind of supposed to be like a constitution for the county. And, I think, was it at the beginning of the Constitution? I think it's Constitution, it says, of the people, by the people, for the people. If this is supposed to act as a constitution for the county, essentially, then it has to be something that the people of the county want to support and will support. It has to be something that's justifiable, that's reasonable, that has the ability to be amended no different than our Constitution was 27 times up to this point. So I can understand your approach. I mean, maybe, we have to listen to the feedback we're getting, and determine what's palatable. What do we think the document has to do as a committee, or we think it should do as a committee? Take that feedback in, and then accordingly adjust the document the way we think it can function, or to a point of, what Lucas was saying. I mean, if there might be something in there that all of us agree on, that it's, but for instance, you're on board with the idea of the ability to do a sales tax. Well, maybe that's the thing that scuttles the whole home rule. And if it is, it is. I don't have a problem with that at all. But there's going to be some things in there that we think as a committee might be really valuable, but they might be unpopular. There might be some things in here that, like you said, I don't disagree with the fact that the ability for ease of understanding isn't a bad idea, because anything that we can understand easier is generally something we can all at least agree upon to a point. So I don't have a problem with taking some of and the election part of it. If that's something we want to pull, I don't have a problem with that myself either.
Well, I guess, after that meeting, at that informational meeting, there wasn't a lot of people there. But we had 9 or 10 or one time, what was it, 12 the next time?
Probably 12, 15, something like that.
Something like that. But I mean, they were understanding, and it was out on the street then that we were wanted to have a sales tax. Well, it's kind of hard to defend that because we don't know just how to but I can see that there's a time that's going to be needed. Like Burley County, that's all they voted for. And we got to stop and think about some of those things. The smaller counties don't have a charter. It's Burley County, Cass County, Williston, and those. And I don't think we're in that class to have that kind of a deal to have to live by. Change to live by.
So now you're saying that we're not even into the same class of counties that would need a home rule charter? I just want to make sure I'm understanding you clearly.
Well, because everybody has the right to have a home rule charter. Any county that wants it. But I don't feel we're in the class to have one like Cass and
Okay.
Burley and
just so expansive, you're saying. Just,
yeah. We spent a lot of time on it, I'll grant that. I mean, we've hashed it over, probably spent too much time talking about it and not got down to the nitty gritty.
I'm so confused, Rodney. I'm so confused about what you're saying. Because you're saying we're spending too much time on it, but then we do need to spend more time on it, and we're writing too much, but really we need to, is it that we need to write the right things? It was my intention to have a finished initial draft at the end of this meeting. That was my intention. At this point, we're probably not going to get there, and that's fine. But then at that point, the next 2 or so meetings we're going to be dedicated to trying to refine that draft and talk about some of these things. And that's okay. It's probably my fault as a chairperson to not have clarified what we were hoping to have happen. But again, with how flexible we've had to be, because some of the things we have talked about for a long time. It's hard to know exactly what you're scheduling until you have the ability to schedule it. The last thing that I want to say, Rodney, is I apologize if you feel slighted by me or that I don't respect you or your opinions. I get the impression that that's the case, and if it is, I apologize, truly. I absolutely value your opinion. I'm glad that you're a member of this committee, and I'm very glad that you have different views than I have. I guess I'm looking at the perspective of, I'm hoping to be a member of this community in 30 or 40 years, and I want to write a document that can stand the test of time like the Constitution can. And I think in order for it to do that, it needs to be flexible enough to deal with what situations may arise. If it's the fear of this community that it's too broad, too flexible, has too much power, that it's allocating to different things, and that it's too scary or big to stomach, then I think that you're right, and we need to take a look at that. Because at some point, as much as I'd like to stand and be idealistic and say I want to write exactly the right document, exactly the way that I'd like to have it, and I won't broker any quarter, we have to be a little bit pragmatic and say, well, what might work? But if we're just talking about the couple of things that you're in favor of, I mean, that doesn't necessarily dramatically shorten the document, because some of these things are the legal requirements. You know, like Article 1, the authorization to have powers. Article 2, yeah, you're right, there are some of the things we could maybe strip out of there, but most of that is just things that the county has the right to do under current ordinance. 3, you know, my point is that most of these things they're going to be there no matter how short we try to make this document. And if they're not there, then it's not a governing document. And so I guess I just don't know quite what it is that you want to strip, or what the committee wants to strip. If we want to remove the elected officials and just have an article in there that says all elected officials will remain elected like they did in the last one, that's fine, but we still need an article to say that. So I mean, I guess I don't know, I just feel like it seems to me that more than if we're using Anthony's language, we're not really at a tactical question, we're at a paradigm question. And so if it's the will of this committee that we cease drafting a document because the paradigm of this committee no longer aligns with the document that we've drafted thus far, then that's maybe something that we should discuss.
I think what maybe has happened a little bit is that finally it's gotten out in the community a little bit more. We started this, back in October?
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
So-
the first meeting was in
Right.
October,
So in
yes.
October, we started this. And then we had some public informational meetings, some speaking at Rotary. So with each person, maybe there were 12 at some informational meetings. Those 12 people go out and talk to 12 more and 12 more. And so the information is getting spread, and with each time it gets spread, it gets elaborated on, and who knows what's getting spread out amongst the community, correct? And so each time this gets spread, rumors may be getting spread about, oh, they're going to increase our taxes, or they're going to do this, or they're going to do that. And so then that's getting back to us. And so with each time, who knows what they're saying out there about this charter, right? And so with that, it gets back to us about, oh my God, what is the county commission doing with this charter? What are they going to do? What is being written? And so it gets scary, and the public's out there, and so when we bring this draft, or the charter should get finished, to the vote, yeah, it's scary, and you want to make sure it's correct. And I think Rodney has very valid points, and as well as you do, Lucas, and everybody here, about wanting to make sure it's a correct draft. Because out in the community are people with ideals and ideas about what's going on here, and they're not all accurate. And so with the 7 or 8 pages that we have here, no, I don't think they're going to read them. You're right, Carrie, they're not. Because nobody reads 7 pages of anything. I agree with you. It needs to be trimmed down, because they're only going to read a short document. They're believing what they're hearing, and most of it probably isn't true. So we need to condense it to be the best that it can be in a short amount of space. And it has to be the exact amount of things that we want them to hear. The most important pieces of this document. A lot of the, I mean, they're very important pieces that are in here, I agree, but a lot of the stuff I don't think needs to be in here. We need to really think about what is the most important things, and we need to make sure all of the stuff that's being said out in that community about what's taking place in here, the inaccuracies, need to be gotten rid of and destroyed. And that's what's being, there's a lot of stuff that's being spread out there, and I think it's getting, part of it is just getting elaborated on, and I think some of it's getting back to us that's on this committee. I mean, we're hearing about it, and there's getting to be some fear. Probably Rodney's getting, hearing about it, we've heard about it, and we're like, you know what? That's not what this is about. We're trying to make a good document, and I think we realize this isn't it right now. We need to shorten this, parts of this need to get taken out.
Okay. I think I was under the impression that that fell to this committee to try to explain what this document was and what it was not. And because I know that there's not a sales tax, and if people out there already believe that there is one, then we've lost. It's over. Because
No,
we
it's
could,
not over,
because
Lucas.
but we could strip everything that says sales tax out of it, and it wouldn't matter because we've already lost control of the narrative and people will believe what they'll believe.
Well, I don't think that's correct. I think we still have the right to make a good document. We just have to work on it a little harder, and we need to change this document to make it correct.
Okay. So then let's table,
That's my thought. I don't know what the rest of the people on this committee think, but I don't think we've worked this hard to get to this point, to strip this we just need to take some things out of this document and make it accurate. That's my view on this.
Well, I certainly have already indicated that there's some things I would ask to come out of here, so. That's my.
Okay, and I agree with Carrie.
On that.
Okay.
That's fine. I don't think that's unreasonable. I don't think it's unreasonable in any way.
Well, I appreciate everybody's viewpoint, regardless of if it's different than mine. I mean, that's the way it is. That's why we have committees and commissions
and I
and
think,
defense lawyers and things like that.
I think if I'm really understanding, getting to the root of all of this, it was, I expected that we were going to do this and have these conversations. I just expected we would have finished the document before we went back and stripped things from it. There's that old saying about what is art, right? A true artist doesn't ask what more can I add, but what more can I take away? That's how you make art, is by taking things away until you have something that is right. But if we don't have anything to ground ourselves in, then what are we doing, And so I don't know. So if at this point we'd like to have a discussion piecemeal about what we would like to see removed, then let's have that discussion. Let's have someone make a suggestion, because at this point I don't feel like I have any sense for what the will of this committee is.
Well, the core ideas of what Rodney's talking about, we haven't addressed anything about sales tax in the document yet. Why don't we start there, finish the taxation section, then roll back to the beginning? And then we can start Article 1 and work our way back through it again and remove what we think needs to be removed. Okay. So it gives us some place to start at least, because otherwise we're going to sit here and talk at each other for another hour.
That's what's happened up until now, is we've covered no ground.
Except for the 8 articles.
We went through the 8 articles, but we just didn't get anything done.
Well, it's understandable that, I totally assumed once we got done that, with whatever we had, we were gonna go back and start stripping stuff out anyway, what we thought was good, what we thought was bad.
I guess maybe I got the horse end of the cart, but I just thought that before we got too far, we don't wanna let this get out of hand either.
I agree.
I guess I would view it as a modeling clay example. Before you can start making your sculpture, you've got to build up this big pile that looks ugly and is messy and, yeah, is horrible looking. And then you start to whittle away and shape it as you go. But at least you're all starting from the same mass of clay. Right now, I don't think we've finished building up that mass yet. We've gotten through the 8 articles. We've said our pieces of some of our concerns. And yeah, some of that has gotten out to the community and gotten conflated or misled. That's okay. Those concerns are a tool for us. They're not to be feared. They're to be understood. And there's a difference between those two. if you go through and say, well, this sounds scary, that the community is gonna think that we're just here to do a sales tax, for example. You're right, that is scary, that could kill anything, especially in this community. However, if we take that to heart right now, before we have even started sculpting this document down to what we're looking for, then we're gonna miss out. Cause you're gonna start building up that sculpture, or building up, say, the feet or toes of it, before you've even got the clay on for the head. Hopefully that analogy is making some sort of sense, cause I'm making it up as I go. But
That's a good analogy. It's a good analogy.
But either way, I mean, right now it seems like we're shooting at a target that's moving while dangling from a helicopter that is also flying in circles. So let's stabilize our target, get to a stable platform, and then let's start to take shots at what we think needs to go or what needs to change. Because like has already been said in the room, I mean, we haven't even gotten to the sales tax part yet. And there's nothing more fearful, for me at least in this document, to see that Article 2 that lists out all the different powers and then not have an article that defines it. And as far as the length of the document, we kind of have two different views going on. One is it's just too long, period, which I understand that, I get it. The other part is that it's too complex, and that people will just pick out what impacts them. I tend more towards that end, at least right now. Because whether this document is 3 pages or 50 pages, I would say maybe 1% of the population is going to actually read the whole thing cover to cover. I can tell you right now, even if we make it 3 pages, I as a voter probably would not read the whole thing. And if I don't hold myself to that, then how can I hold anyone else to it? So the length, total length, isn't so much what concerns me. What concerns me is if I go in here and I see that the county is giving itself the power to, I don't know, levitate water, I'm going to go to that article and look exactly what do they mean by levitate water. Or to borrow a phrase from the FAA right now, that the FAA can legislate all the way down to the tops of your blades of grass. That's something that, you know, I could care less about the entire CFR, help me out, acronym, Code of Federal Regulations. I could care less about the rest of it. I'm going to focus in on that one piece. And that is okay. But again, it's not something that we need to fear at this point, because those fears, or people's concerns, or even the conflations that get made, are great indicators of areas that we need to be extra vigilant in how we draft this. But it's not a sign to stop because we haven't really come up with what we've put out yet. So that was a long ramble, sorry about that. So I guess my wishes at this point, and I don't know if this needs to be a motion or whatnot, but let's continue on, finish drafting the document today, go through our Articles 9 and 11, at least from the other ones, and then let's go back through and basically follow the schedule that we talked about at the last meeting. Because at the last meeting we covered this, that today we were going to finish this document, and the next 2 or 3 meetings would be, we would go through and hone in, get rid of things that we don't agree with, get rid of things that we don't think are workable, because there are certainly going to be those types of things. And that community feedback that we've been getting so far is instrumental in that, but don't apply it quite yet until we get that massive clay put together. So I don't know if that needs to be a motion to get back on agenda or not, but
Well, I think we're still technically on draft Article 9 portion of the current agenda. And when we refer to Article 9, just to make sure, seeing as I was not in the last meeting, we're referring to Article 9 of the previous charter, is that correct? What's currently listed as Article 9 of the 1992 charter?
No, Article 9 is Cass County's.
It was my request to submit Article 9 from Cass County for review, and,
That's their tax.
because that deals with the sales tax definition.
Maybe we could copy this. Actually, I found the key one.
Okay, reading Article 9. I'm going to do a reading of the entirety of the article as listed in Cass County's Home Rule Charter. When I am finished, we will go section by section and vote on that at that point. Article 9, Revenue Authority and Limitations. Section 1, Scope of Authority. Subject to the provisions of this article, Cass County will have the authority, by ordinance or resolution of the Board of County Commissioners, to levy and collect property taxes, sales taxes, income taxes, motor vehicle registration fees, excises, fees, and special assessments for the benefits conferred. Section 2, Limitations. Subsection 1. No ordinance or resolution may be adopted by the Board of County Commissioners levying property taxes in excess of 75 mills in total until referred by the Board of County Commissioners for the approval of the electorate at any regular county election. This mill levy limit does not include any levies certified to the Board of County Commissioners by any other governing body. Subsection 2. No ordinance or resolution may be adopted by the Board of County Commissioners implementing any new or additional tax not currently being levied or assessed until referred by the Board of County Commissioners for approval by the electorate at any regular election. Subsection 3. Any ordinance or resolution submitted to the electorate must be approved by a majority vote of the electors voting. Subsection 4. In order to subject to the assessment of the provisions of this article, all property must be assessed in a uniform manner as prescribed by the State Board of Equalization and the State Supervisor of Assessments. No ordinance or resolution of the Board of County Commissioners may supersede any state law which determines what property is subject to or exempt from ad valorem, sales, or use taxes. Going back to Section 1, Scope of Authority, are there any thoughts of the Board?
I would move that we strike income taxes, motor vehicle registration fees, and excises from that tax at this point. I
There's a
don't think income tax is something that we want to get into.
There's a motion to excise from the Cass County Article 9, Section 1. The phrase is income taxes, motor vehicle registration fee, excises, and fees and special assessments. Did you want to include fees and special assessments or leave that out?
Leave that out.
Okay, so everything up to excises. Is there a second?
May I interrupt you here? What page are you on here when you're reading that from Cass County's?
It'd be
Article
Article
9.
9.
Page 8 of 10.
Yeah, 8.
At the top it says, keep going.
That's,
Oh, you only have through 4.
yeah.
Here, you're right. Here's mine. I'll make another copy. Starts right, there's section 1 we're looking at.
Okay, okay.
Still look that for me, here's another copy. Does everybody else have their copy, so we're on the right page? Would you like one, Mark? Would either of you like the copy? Yes? Okay. 1 or 2? Does it matter? Just 1? Okay.
2 total.
Huh? 4? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for doing that, Adam.
No problem. It just starts right on the Article 9 there, where we're at. Everybody else okay? Is all the right talk? Okay.
So we can put it all the way to the end of the sentence.
Just to excises, fees and special assessments, you want it to be applicable.
Rather than fitting through it.
If you got one, I'd be pretty good at using my copier back there.
Not to make you your own number.
What was the start of it?
I just steal yours.
Everything, he made a motion to strike everything, income taxes, motor vehicles. So there's a motion on the floor to strike income taxes, motor vehicle registration fees, excises, and that would be it. Is there a second?
I'll say no.
There's a motion and a second to strike, one more time, income taxes, motor vehicle registration fees, and excises from the wording of section 1 under scope of authority. Is there any further discussion?
What counts as an excise, I guess? Just out of curiosity, any inclination as to what that would be? Just before, I wanna know what I'm striking before I strike it. Let's put it that
Before you
way.
second it?
Yeah, well, I seconded it, I'm fine
Well, I
with
think
that.
an excise tax is a tax on a good, right?
That would be my guess as well, yes.
Indirect tax charged on the sale of good.
Indirect tax on a sale of a good. What would you excise tax?
It'd be like cigarette tax, it'd be an excise tax.
Or the merge.
Border tax.
Yeah, most often levied upon cigarettes, alcohol, gasoline, and gambling.
Merchant sale.
Be an excise tax.
Any further discussion? Hearing no further discussion, all in favor of excising the portion stated signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Motion carries. Rodney, do you have a reason for voting no?
I guess I gotta think about this for a little bit. Whatever, go ahead. I got the right to vote no.
You do. If you had thoughts that you wanted to add. Just think this is the first time I've heard you vote no on something. I would like to ask whether the committee, given the fact that recreation and tourism becomes an increasingly important part of the economy of Ramsey County and the surrounding area, whether or not we would want to include a special provision to allow for a lodging tax or not.
I don't believe you can. I don't believe through the state century code, a county can right now lobby for a lodging tax.
Okay.
I think correct me if I'm wrong, Carrie. I'm not saying I'm against it, but I'm saying I don't think per our century code, a county can collect a lodging tax. And I'm only thinking that because I know our Tourism Alliance partnership is looking at trying to rewrite and implement with the next legislative session that they can.
Okay.
But I don't think a county can do that at this point.
Well, without.
And I believe if a lodging tax is collected, there's specific guidelines per the state that it has to be funded for. Such as, I think there's a certain amount that can go towards administration of utilizing those taxes, and there's a certain amount that has to be used for
There's a
marketing.
priority and a hierarchy already in place.
Yeah.
Okay.
may be right. The way it reads is to levy and collect excises, fees, charges, franchise and license taxes, sales and use taxes, farm machinery gross receipt taxes, alcoholic beverage gross receipt taxes, a city lodging tax, a city restaurant tax. And for the purposes of this section, any taxes imposed on farm machinery, farm irrigation equipment, and farm machinery repair parts, and must be used exclusively for agricultural purposes or on alcoholic beverages, were in effect before 2005. So,
Yeah, so I think if it passes the legislation down the road, where a county could collect it, we could put it back to a vote under our home rule. But I don't think we can currently ask for that.
okay, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. In our instance, I think it would be great, I mean, if we could do that, because we're currently promoting, which is great, I mean, I'm not saying it's bad, but we're, you know, promoting everything within our county right now and collecting on the city. So it'd be nice to,
Speaking of lodging tax, correct?
I don't think we can. On the county side?
No.
Okay.
Not correct.
Are there any other thoughts on section 1, scope of authority? Is there a motion to adopt or to reject section 1, scope of authority as written in Cass County's home rule charter, provided the income tax, motor vehicle registration fees and excises be removed?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just saying, provided that that's true, is there a motion to adopt it? Or reject it?
Move to adopt.
There's a motion to adopt, is there a second?
I'll second for discussion.
Motion and second, is there further discussion?
So are we going to put lodging in there, or is that count as a special assessment or fee, or is that, was that the discussion? I apologize. I just
That's
stepped out
okay,
into the restroom.
We can't, per the century code, right now it's written to collect a lodging tax, it needs to be within a city limit.
Oh, it does?
Yep.
Oh, okay.
So
I wasn't aware of that.
the-
Interesting.
Tourism Alliance Partnership, which is the legislative area for our tourism, is looking at trying to put that forth in the next legislative session.
Okay.
They had it in the last one and it failed, and so they're gonna try and bring that back again next
Okay.
year.
Interesting.
And then if that passes, then we could go after that if we wanted to put it to a vote of our county.
Okay.
Yeah.
I
And it
apologize
would,
if you had to
no,
explain yourself.
oh no, that's okay. And that, but that does go for, so if the county wanted to implement a 2% lodging tax, so to say, it would be, so our out-of-city lodging would have to take in that 2%, and then it would be a 2% on top of what the city's already collecting on the lodging tax. So the city's already collecting a 2% for lodging, which is the max. So in essence, then our city hoteliers would be collecting basically 4%.
Well, unless you wrote it accordingly.
I don't think you can.
Well,
I could be wrong.
it's hypothetical.
I talked with Jerry Johnson on that just to get some clarification. I know he had talked with the state tax department, and I could be wrong, but I believe what he had stated is once the county was to implement a lodging tax, it would be on every single lodging facility in the county. I don't think you can break it down by city and county.
Well, it would all depend on how the
Yeah.
statute's changed. Okay, very good, thank you.
Is there further discussion?
Well, on that special assessment for benefits and confer, what difference would that make if you just said if need? If needed.
Oh, at the end here?
So you're saying if it read fees and special assessments if needed?
Well, I think that'd be better than conferred.
much.
coming.
No, that it included, fees and special assessments.
Oh.
So I just got rid of income taxes.
Rodney, I
for
think
motor
if you're reading the
vehicles.
statement, I think it's, they use the word conferred simply because it's not necessarily if it's needed or not. It's, you can only special assess somebody if they're receiving a benefit from it.
Yeah,
You know, so like for instance, the water districts that wants to set up there so they can set up the airport cooling. The only people that can be, you can't tax somebody that's not in the, you know,
Not in the.
they have to be able to receive a benefit from it. So the benefit conferred means that you can then be taxed for the fact you're getting benefit.
Okay, yeah,
Or, you know, the idea of somebody, if you wanted to special assess to put a road in or something, the people that live on that road are gonna be special assessed versus, you know, on the share or whatever. Like when they did a Secaucus Drive or whatever it was out there.
well, when they did 7th Street here in town, I mean,
Yeah, and the town has a cost share thing for it, but the same thing is the people that live on that road get specially assessed because the benefits are conferred upon them.
Yeah.
But they don't have to pay the whole cost because obviously there's other people traveling on it as well.
a special assessment is a targeted group.
And I think it's just basically saying,
Yeah.
if you use it, then you get the advantage. Yeah, the sidewalks, that's a good example.
Yep.
Further discussion? Hearing no further discussion, all those in favor of adopting section 1, scope of authority, under Article 9, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Hearing none, motion carries. Moving on to section 2, limitations. Are there thoughts on section 2, limitations, subsection 1?
I'm just questioning, because I'm not familiar with this, but they say, in number 1, levying property taxes in excess of 75 mils. Is that different in our county, or is that comparable? I'm not sure on those collections.
We can go up to 100 and
The general is 60.
the generals, yeah. If you added everything together, we can go higher than 75 mils.
Oh,
But part of that would be is that, as they say there, we levy for other entities' budgets that roll through the county. So like, for instance, when we levy for the library, or the airport authority, or for Devil's Lake, they're all separate entities with their own separate budgets, so they would not count towards that 75 mils. That's how I read this. So I guess in my personal opinion, I think it's probably easier and more understandable to write it by saying the county can't go past whatever it is instead of all these other budgets, because those things kind of can, you know, swirl around and change.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just easier to say we can't go past, I don't even know what the number would be right now, but 125 or whatever it would be if you added everything together in statute we can do right now, yeah. Well, everything in statute that we can legally do right now, you can see what that number is and then kind of set it off of that accordingly. The only reason I say that is I don't want to, at least personally, limit ourselves on property taxes because, you know, there's a lot of moving parts in that property tax thing right now. And we, as a county, being we have, you know, high costs of the law enforcement center and all that, we're already having to use the general to offset those costs quite a bit. So we don't want to set that cap too low, otherwise we'll really restrict what we can do, and then it could get interesting real quick, let's put it that way.
okay.
Plus, if we set the cap too low on top of it, say this were to pass, if you got it and you get it to pass, the state just in the last session changed the law, so we're gonna have to go back and ask the people to put 10 mils of additional road funding on that's gonna disappear in 2021. So if we cap it and those mills disappear, I don't know what the ramification would be for if you don't get that vote back, you're gonna lose those 10 mils. That are, the availability of those 10 mils, I should say. You know, we don't want our infrastructure out there going ahead because I would assume we're gonna be able to get that passed simply if we have to do it, just because nobody wants our roads to go bad. But you never know. And I honestly hadn't heard about that until a little while ago. Terry Trainer was visiting about it, but yeah, that's something we're gonna have to ask the people for. I don't know why they did that, at. Any levies certified to the Board of County Commissioners by any other governing body.
Because they.
Yeah, they don't certify it to us, so that's basically saying the school board and the townships and the city. It's not meaning any of the outside boards that are structured accordingly. Because they don't have to certify, they just have to come in front of us.
Well, would giving their budget be
I don't
a
know,
certified document?
that's the lawyer. That's a good question, I don't know.
Budget is certified to the county commissioners by any other governing body.
No.
Well, I'm just looking at what we've got when we talk about submission of a budget right now.
Because the general,
Well, right.
the general alone is 60. We can go up to 60.
That's the general one.
That's just the
Yeah.
general alone. County road and bridge is 10, or you can go up to 30 with a majority vote.
I didn't even know that.
Let's see.
I think the highest it's been since I've been on the commission was like 112, in that range. And we're down to what, 89 this year or something like that? 90-ish.
You exclude all the other.
This subsection is actually one that I was considering for striking, because I don't see the benefit that it brings or clarity that it brings to it.
So you're saying just
Just strike
basically,
subsection 1 total.
Subsection 1, I read through it a few times and even bringing this up last month, I was going, I don't see the application of this to our scenario.
so you're saying basically the state gives us the authority to do property taxes to a certain level and we just live with that since that's what we're saying?
Yeah.
I could live with that, I think that's reasonable. Instead of putting a number out there.
Mainly because I don't think this is the proper document to put in that number. I mean, if we have to go to the vote of the people anyway, then what's the point?
Double, yeah. Yeah, doesn't it in the century code tell you that? How you can just first up? It's totally confusing to me, I don't understand you.
The only other question I would have in it too is, and this is a legalese question, is it says no ordinance or resolution. Well, when we adopt a budget, it's not an ordinance or a resolution, it's just the adoption of our yearly budget. So is this saying like a special ordinance paying for something particular over and above what the state allows us?
Well, I presume that's what they were getting at, but I don't think it's very.
Yeah.
Well, what, are you talking about the subsection 2?
I think
Oh,
that's
what
what
they're-
they're at.
Are you
But
talking
where
about,
are you talking?
Me?
about subsection 2?
Section 2, number 1, no ordinance or resolution may be adopted. Well, when we adopt a budget, it's not an ordinance or a resolution, it's just a budget.
Right, but they're saying, basically what they're saying is you can't implement a tax without having a vote, is what it's saying. Saying that you can't by ordinance or resolution initiate a tax. Because it's more clear if you read it in the second subsection, right? No ordinance or resolution may be adopted by the Board of Commissioners implementing any new or additional tax not currently being levied unless referred to an election, a vote.
No, I realize that, but what I'm saying is I think it's a two-piece scenario. What I'm saying is they're saying if you want to ask for, like in this document, if you wanted to ask for sales tax, income tax, motor vehicle tax, excise, whatever, you have to ask the people for that. But number 1 is specifically stating to the fact if you wanted to fund something with property taxes specifically over and above what the state allows, it can't be over 75 additional mills, is what I think it's stating. At least that's how I'm questioning and how it reads. I don't know why we'd ever need 75 mils to pay for something, but that's why I'm questioning, and maybe I'm reading it wrong completely, but I'm just looking at it going, it's very obtuse. It's very vague.
Strike it.
Is that a motion?
I'll make a motion to strike it.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
There's a motion and a second to strike section 2 limitations, subsection 1, Any further discussion? Hearing no further discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Hearing none, motion carries. Subsection is stricken. Section 2, subsection 2. Any thoughts regarding it?
You're rushing me.
My only question would be, do we want to specify general or primary, or do we just want to say regular county election? I'm sorry, I said that's the question. You know, because less voters vote in the primary, so would it be smarter to put it in the general, when most people are used to voting in that
I
November
think so.
election?
I'd rather put it as just election in general,
Thank you.
as far as it doesn't need to be a general election, it
Just,
does,
just any regular election?
any election.
Okay. I'll make the motion, we adopt verbatim.
There's a motion to adopt subsection 2 verbatim. Is there a second?
Yes. Second.
Second. Is there any further discussion?
When you, I'm just a little confused, okay, electorate at any regular county election, regular, that is what you're saying, right?
Yeah, it'd be either in the June primary or the November general.
Or a special election.
No,
No.
that's not a regular election.
That's not a regular election.
Good, no special.
Any regularly scheduled
Primary.
election, any election that's on the
Not special.
schedule.
Yeah.
So June.
Any even numbered year, June or November.
Is there a reason that we don't want to,
Because you don't want to have to call a special election unless you totally have to, because of the cost is usually what's the problem with it.
okay,
Well, the cost would be a big factor in that.
Huge.
Yeah, that, you generally don't want to call special unless you totally and completely have to, because it's very expensive getting everything together and getting people to work.
well, my question mark is if we do find ourselves in a disaster scenario, do we want to wait until the next even numbered year? I'll put it this way, I'd rather have the option than to have it explicitly said, or explicitly no.
Who would have the authority then
To call the
Call
election,
it
that's the
For the
question.
commissioners.
the commission?
If
Okay.
you wrote it in accordingly, yeah, we could refer it into special election if needed, if it was written that way. I shouldn't say we, I would say we, I'm sitting here now, but it's, I'm not gonna be here.
And if you don't budget
Yeah, for a special,
previous year,
It won't happen anymore.
yeah.
because election year, the budget goes from $30,000 down to $5.
Running the two elections is very expensive. And that's even with us voting by mail and doing everything else and only having one polling site, it's still expensive.
Election is, the cost is there regardless of how you do it.
That's right.
There's a motion and a second to adopt subsection 2 verbatim. Any further discussion? Hearing no further discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Hearing none, motion carries. Subsection 3. Any thoughts regarding subsection 3?
I would amend that we need to bring that to a supermajority rather than a simple majority, so 66 plus 1.
There's a motion to amend that we need a supermajority in order to enact an ordinance or resolution. Is there a second?
What did you say, Anthony?
Super majority.
A
You want a
supermajority rather than,
60% vote.
yeah,
Yeah, okay.
Did you want a 60% vote or a 66, a 2/3 vote?
I'd prefer a 2/3, but I'd settle for a 60.
We hate one over price.
Well, I guess it was brought up at that one of those meetings that was there, that 60% on some of those things would work.
The motion as it stands, unless Anthony wants to amend, is for 2/3.
So you want to put a 2/3 majority vote.
Yeah. And if I am understanding this, the scope of this subsection would just be for tax increases, correct? Okay.
per day.
Yeah, because it's under the revenue authority
Yeah.
section, so that would be my understanding as well.
Did you get a second?
No.
I'll second.
Okay.
There's a motion and a second to require 2/3 of all voting electors to vote yes to enact.
That goes clear then to the top. Section 1 too then.
Yes, everything that section 1 allows, section 2 limitates.
Okay.
Yeah, it would be anything
That
that
would be over and above what we have in state statute, basically, I believe is how it would read. I'm just, I'll die on my hill here probably, but I disagree completely with the sentiment of that. Simply because we hold our elections and we allow ourselves to elect officials with a 50+1 vote. And then when we talk about taxation, it's like all of a sudden we don't trust the people to make a wise decision at 50+1. And I've always had a problem with that. Because if we believe the people have the ability to elect everyone that represents us in our republic on a 50+1, why in the hell don't we trust them to make a quality decision on taxation? Because, you know, the budget we set here is huge every year,
Yeah.
and we're all elected by a simple majority. And any of these boards that we have, if it's a 50+1, and then all of a sudden it's like, well, you gotta jump through hoops to get 60 or 66%. And I'm not saying that I'm opposed to having a quality discussion on any kind of taxation that occurs. But if it's something that a board like the county commission or a board like the school board is asking for a building project, at that point, you elected those people at a 50+1, call them on the carpet if they've got a bad plan. You know, go to the meetings, hammer it out, tell them you guys are paying too much for what you're trying to get here. You know, and we've had discussions on this before, you know? I don't know, I always have a problem with that. Because I've seen some, you know, some fantastic projects get voted down at the school level because you have to get 60%. You know?
Well, I mean, it basically gives a tyranny to 34% of the vote.
Yeah, that's my main problem with it. 34% of the people in the community can tell the other 65 or 66% that your vote doesn't matter, essentially. Not that doesn't matter, but
Your
that
majority doesn't matter.
the majority doesn't matter anymore.
Right. And so, I mean, I take your point and I take your meaning, and I actually just agree with Adam right down the line.
And I might be completely wrong, I'll say that, but that's just my thought process.
In my mind, basically, you're just ensuring that you'll never pass anything with respect to taxation. I mean, you're basically accomplishing that.
Well, and
3 o'clock.
Well, the point of it is to make it difficult. I mean, there's no hiding that part. There is that point. But the reasoning behind it, at least from what I have understood, from most of the people that I've talked to, is when you elect someone at 51%, at the very least, their lifespan is the length of that term. Most cases, it's a lot less. When you enact a new tax, most of the time, those stay.
So
Indefinitely.
can I ask a second question?
Sure.
Are you gonna set the standard to repeal a tax at 50% then? Or do you want that to be at 66% too?
I would assume that would be at 66 also.
Okay, so then
Because
nothing else
these-
get repealed either.
These are long-term taxes that need to be difficult to change.
Right, but you see the problem, right?
Oh, of course.
You either make it so that you could have all of the taxes be voted away.
Yeah.
Right, but no new taxes can be added. Or you make it so that nothing ever changes, and you may as well have 80% needed.
I don't know if I go that far,
No, but
I understand what you're
and I
saying.
understand where you're coming from too, but my thought process is this, okay, I'm up for election this year. I've been on the county commission for 3 years and change. I budgeted, it will be 4 times this July. In those 4 budgeting cycles, been sitting at this table for essentially $24 million worth of locally assessed taxes. That's as much as what was gonna be spent on the wellness center. Yet I got here with 50+1, and the wellness center at that point would need 50 because of the sales tax, but you know what I'm saying? It doesn't jive with me that we're taking the power out of the hands of the people to pass a tax with a majority. So we're basically saying the majority, I'm not saying that we shouldn't always question when somebody is trying to get a tax across, because I'm of that opinion too. If it's a bad project, it's a bad project. But again, that goes, I'm on my horse here. It goes back to the
No,
same,
and I appreciate.
it goes back to the same
that.
problem though of, and again, I'm probably on the, you know, I watch too much TV probably, but I wish we could, and the sentiment in the room is that, you know, I won't even say it because I'll just open up the cameras. I'll stop right there.
But I also, in addition to that, I have a structural question.
Sure.
So we've been talking from the point of value. This is a structural question. If you set your bar to initiate a new tax at 66%, I would suggest then we also set the bar to issue debt at that same level. So right now, if the county issues bonds, you don't need 66%. And basically what my fear is then if there is a budget crisis, why would the county commission ever, in the short term, try to get a tax passed that'll fail, when they could just get a simple majority to pass bonded debt, which, you know, is essentially why the federal government is in the mess that it's in. Do you take my point?
I take your point, and the difference there again is the time scale. A bonded debt has an expiration date, a point when it is due.
But
Assuming-
Rodney made the point that he wants new taxes to have a sunset, so why don't we just go with that?
That sounds reasonable.
Yeah, I don't want like unlimited taxation.
So-
Like, hey, have a sales tax and it goes forever. I think
So
everything
here-
should have some type of a sunset on it, unless it's a, you know, a baseline taxing structure.
Right, I'm
See,
just,
it's those baselines that is where I would see the application of this. And maybe we need to amend the recommendation here, but if we're gonna say, you know, a 1/4 cent sales tax for the good and operation of the county, that's something that needs to be agreed to over and above that 50% because it has a long-lasting impact. On the other side, you also have, once you are used to paying, say, that 7% sales tax, when something does sunset, it's easy to quickly replace it with something to maintain that 7% sales tax, because people get used to paying that. It's a slippery slope, is what I'm trying to say.
but presumably if people are okay paying taxes, then they're okay paying taxes, right?
But there's no downside to it. There's never a downward trend. It's always gonna be an upward trend.
Well, unless you put a sunset on it, right?
You're saying if you sunset it, then they'll just try to backfill the sunset, is what you're saying?
Yeah.
But then it has to pass again, right?
It does, but
I mean,
my problem with, I shouldn't say problem, because it's not a problem, it's just my head, I wrap my head around this as in terms of the discussion of, I realize that, and, you know, sunsetting a tax is a quality idea.
Mm-hmm.
The problem with it is that, and this is a whole other thing, but the wealth we've created as public entities, or I shouldn't say public entities, the wealth we've created by how we've developed our cities, our towns, our structures, does not sustain basic infrastructure needs. It's just that simple. We're at a deficit. We're going to be at a deficit. We're going to be grinding on pavement at some point. I hate to say it that way. It might be 20 years from now, it might be 30 years from now, it might be 50 years from now, but it's going to happen at some point. The cost of everything continues to rise. So you're going to have to, there's going to be hard decisions to be made like there's always been in the past. But it's just really, I find it difficult to limit ourselves to that majority, because it's, you know, I don't know. I don't have a coherent thought right now, but it's not cogent at this point. Other than I struggle with it. It's kind of the old concept of don't let the perfect get in the way of the good. You know, when they tried to build the Sweetwater addition, there was, the first time around, there was really not a lot of change from what there is now.
Yeah.
But they couldn't get 60%, and the kids were walking back and forth to a portable classroom bundled up 20 times a day, because no one wanted to pay another penny. I have a problem with that, when 58% of the people voted for it. I just do. I don't know why, I just can't get my head around it, but it just bothers me. And luckily it passed the second time, and I think there's probably not a person, well, there's people in the community that disagree with it, but a majority of the people that have used that facility say, why didn't we do this sooner? You know?
Was there a second on Anthony's motion? There was, right?
Yeah, Rodney seconded it. Or no,
Carrie.
Carrie seconded it, I'm sorry.
There's a motion and a second on the floor. Is there any further discussion? Hearing no further discussion, all in favor signify by saying aye. All opposed signify by saying aye.
Aye. I must have made a good argument. No, I didn't. I'm just joking. I'm joking.
So is there an easy way to amend it so that it includes some of that precaution along with the timescale? That's what I'm going around in my head right now, because you make a fair point.
I think the best way in my mind to do it is if you vote for a sales tax and you have a sunset clause on the sales tax, you then put a provision in essentially that says you can't immediately turn around and ask for a sales tax to fill in that sunsetted sales tax. So then you give yourself a little bit of a break between there, and then people have some clarity of mind going, hey, that one's sunsetted and we're voting on something completely new to backfill that maybe 2 years from now or 4 years from now. And it gives them that mindset of, okay, this is a different tax, and we're at a lower tax now. Do we want to raise our taxes again? You know, that's the only way I can think to kind of do it.
I love the idea, but that's going to hamstring ourselves. Because if we get to a point where we say all of a sudden when sunsets we go down 2%,
I mean, if you've got
and now
programs
we're locked at that 2% less, no matter what, because you can't backfill it. That's where I'm battling back and forth on
I understand, yeah.
how do we accomplish this flexibility yet with restraint, so that we don't end up into a scenario like almost every other tax in the federal and state and local levels.
Yeah, and the other problem with it, to a point, you almost have to clarify what you're going to sunset if you're going to sunset things, because something like a lodging tax is a standing tax, generally speaking.
And
it's not a sunsettable tax.
That would fall into that 66% because it's difficult to put in place. That was my vision for it, was any tax that is going to be long lasting, like a lodging tax.
Well, lodging tax, you could probably get 66% because nobody living here is going to pay it.
Exactly.
Be like, hey, people from Wisconsin are paying it.
So I guess what is the sentiment amongst the committee members on that style of a compromise? Because I agree with Adam that the school type of taxes, that classroom example that you brought up, is a classic case of where 51% is and should be reasonable. You have a specific project, you have a specific need. The majority at this time can be trusted to fulfill that.
I mean, and again, I've been the king of unpopular opinions, it seems today.
Sorry
But
about that.
but it's
Days like that.
it's my view that if you make it easy to implement and easy to repeal, you have no problem. And that's why I like having a simple majority, and then you make it clear that because the community has the ability to refer things and to initiate things, then at any election they can initiate the repeal of that tax and do it with a simple majority, just like it was to put it on there in the first place.
See, and that's the second side of this coin that I'm a little bit concerned with. What Rodney had brought up earlier is that if we're going to get rid of that referral, or I forget what you call it now. What was the right you just brought up? Initiation process. That's the backside. So for me to look at this and say, yes, we're okay with these new taxes. If we're going to give the government more power to tax or do something, then we should get something in return. And that's
Most definitely more power for the people.
Which is what the idea behind the initiation of the referral, right?
That's exactly why I'm in support of both.
Right,
Both
but
the
so
sales.
that's my argument for why you want both, right? Is that you make it easy to implement, you make it easy to repeal, and then you don't get locked into these questions that we have about what happens when something sunsets and we don't have the money to turn the lights on, or what happens if you get something passed and you can never appeal it, or what happens if you can never get something passed and you've got children freezing outside, or what happens when you've got the government seeking to go into debt rather than to increase revenue. Because debt will be more expensive every time.
Of course it is. Got interest payments, got loans.
So that's what I'm scared of, is that makes us poor stewards of wealth if the only option then is to go for debt. And I do believe you might see that.
I sure hope not.
You know, so again, that's what I'm saying. So that's my argument, is that it should be exactly as written right now, easy to implement, easy to repeal, make sure that we leave the power to initiate. So let the citizens repeal it if they want to. Let the citizens ask for it if they want to, too.
Mhm.
You know, I think the biggest fear that I've heard in the community is that this is the county commission that's looking to all of a sudden be, you know,
Yeah.
godlike, and that's not the idea. The idea is to give as many or more powers to the community, to the people, as you're giving to the commission. But maybe I'm wrong, and maybe it's viewed differently. We're still on sub-article 3. Is there any further discussion?
Question,
Yes, sir.
let's have the question.
Oh, you're calling the question, so,
I'm calling the question, how we're gonna vote on this.
well, would you like me to make a motion and then vote on it, see what we wanna do?
Don't we have a vote?
We do not have a motion on the table right now.
Oh, excuse me.
No, that's fine. I'll make the
I was
motion that we
discussing
adopt it
this.
verbatim as is stated there, so we can at least see where we're at. How about that?
There's a motion to adopt verbatim. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. There's a motion and a second. All those in favor of adopting verbatim signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign?
Aye.
Aye,
You almost need a roll call.
Yeah, I guess so. Candy,
Division of the House.
please call the roll.
Hold on. Just lost my pencil.
You're fine. Oh, you lose the legend.
Right. Guess I'm done.
Okay, so Adam and Rod. No?
So who made the motions? I made
Susie.
the motion and then, did Susie
Susie.
call? I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
Susie
Susie
seconded,
seconded. Okay.
and I asked for the question.
Yeah, and then Roddy called the question.
Okay, so we're referring to section 2.
Section 3.
Section 2,
Two.
subsection
Section 2,
3.
subsection 3, I'm sorry.
Okay. Alright, let me get my note. Okay, Paula,
So is that, are we at the 50?
Verbatim, yeah.
Verbatim, by majority vote. So it's
You-
a 50.
Yeah, do you want to adopt it at 50 plus 1?
Yes.
Simple majority.
Would be asking the people for that.
okay, Susie,
Yes.
Anthony,
No.
Rodney,
Yes,
Lucas,
Yes.
Carrie,
Aye.
Adam.
Fine.
She's the last one.
Okay.
Passes.
Motion carries. Call the roll. Section 2, subsection 4. Thoughts? I think that it's good as written.
I make a motion?
I can. Or do you make a motion?
I'll make a motion to take it as is.
Okay, there's a motion to approve as is.
Seconded.
Motion and a second.
It's pretty straightforward.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing no further discussion, all in favor of adopting section 2, subsection 4 verbatim, signify by saying aye.
aye,
Opposed, same sign. Hearing none, motion carries. All right, that should complete Article 9. The next one on the agenda is Article 11, succession of government. I think that this one will go quickly, so I'm going to ask that we all hang tight and finish this, and then we'll be scheduling our next meeting. Article 11, succession of government. Section 1, rights of officers and employees preserved. Nothing in this charter, except specifically as provided, will affect or impair the rights, privileges, duties, or authority of officers and employees of the county or of any office, department, agency, board, or commission existing at the time this charter takes effect. Section 2, continuance of contracts. All contracts entered into by the county prior to taking effect will continue in force and effect. Section 3, pending actions and proceedings. The adoption of this charter will not abate or otherwise affect any action or proceeding, civil or criminal pending when it comes in effect, brought by or against the county or any office, department, agency, or officer. Section 4, resolutions and policies to remain in force. All county resolutions and policies in force at the time this charter takes effect and not inconsistent with this charter will continue in force until amended or repealed. Section 1.
That's
Right.
Article 8 in our
Yeah,
current charter.
Oh, I'm sorry, did I read the wrong one?
miscommunication. apparently.
I'm lost here, you aren't reading what I've got here.
I apologize.
What-
I'd like to
what-
read what
what
you've
we
got
have?
there. My bad.
On the
I
agenda,
think we made
it's
too many
amendments after
mistakes in
adoption.
reading some of this.
I think we might have read.
And that would be Article 12 of Cass County, if that's the one they're considering.
Oh, amendments and repeal?
Yeah, amendments after adoption is what.
Sorry, I thought we were doing it in 11. I apologize.
What's number 12 then?
Amendments and repeal.
Oh,
That's number
oh.
9 on ours.
Yeah, we've already got that.
Yeah, so what's
Oh.
left?
I think it might have been written down wrong. We had a question on one of the sections we worked on previously, and I think that's why we made a note that we were gonna go back to that question we had, but I don't recall what the question was off the top of
And
my
again, I
head.
apologize, I was not here at the end of the last
No,
meeting, so I
let's see
don't know.
where we were in here. New section 8 of old article 10. So, in the minutes, you just said motion was made just to review the revenue and authority limitations at the next meeting, that was it. I'm trying to look and see if there was something in here that said what that one was that we had the question on, see if we made a note of it here. It was after.
The section 5 article, of old Article 10 it said here. Whatever that is.
Oh, here we go, right here. Motion was made by Anthony Irvin, seconded by Paula Vestad to review section 6 of old Article 10 after contact, it had to do with bonding,
Ah, that's right.
after making contact with Bill Fagey, Northland Trust. We had some bonding questions
Oh,
on
yeah,
that
I
bonding
remember
section.
that.
That's what it was.
Yep.
Now, where is that at in this? Is the next one.
Do you mind while we're looking that up? My daughter has a 3:30 appointment, so we do have to leave. But can we set the next meeting date really quick?
I think.
Is that
Of course.
okay?
Such should be okay.
Sorry.
Of course. And I apologize, this meeting has run so long.
No, that's okay. I was part of that problem.
Okay, do we want to schedule another meeting in April, maybe the 25th, be the last Wednesday in April? At 1:30, same time, same location?
I'm comfortable with that, because I'm not gonna be in the field by the 20th of April, I don't think.
That should work for me also.
Okay, is there a motion to schedule the next Home Rule Charter Committee meeting for April 25th? It's a Wednesday at 1:30 PM in the county courthouse.
So,
Is there a second? There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing no further discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Hearing none, motion carries. The next meeting will be on the 25th.
And then we'll plan on kind of going over everything and maybe taking some time break, so
Yeah,
till maybe like.
Yep.
I think what we'll have Candy do at the start of the next meeting is pass out the final version of the initial draft, which sounds like an oxymoron, but
Right.
I probably will
I'll pass it out.
be able to attend many more,
yeah, she's getting into election season.
That's good. That's fine.
so.
I'll take notes.
Yeah.
You won't be able to read them, but I'll
I
take
mean,
them.
we have the camera too, but I mean, just,
No, and thank you so much for your time and everything that you do for this, so.
you know, with only 2 of us, I mean, if it's not busy, you know, might be able to swing it, but.
Sure. And I think we're getting to the point now where the meetings that we have in here are probably getting close to coming to an end anyway. And then any further meetings will be out in the community. So,
Sorry, guys.
Thank you, Susan.
Thanks, Sue.
Oh,
Oh, I think it had to do with the question of emergency bond debt versus regular bond debt, if I remember correctly, because we wanted to know just what the difference was. Because if we're gonna write this, we do have to leave a provision in there talking about bonding, because it's something we have a continuation of being able to do. Did you ever get an answer on it?
You know, I sent an email and he was going to, he forwarded it to his legal counsel.
Oh, and they just haven't.
And I haven't gotten
Okay.
anything back yet.
So essentially then we have a finished initial document then at this point.
It's just to go back once we hear something on that.
Okay, so if you can get the finished document out to everyone, then we should be, we can start going back with that.
When you do that, we need a motion to replace all instances of Article X with whatever proper article it's meant to refer to.
To renumber and re-letter accordingly. I'll make that motion.
There's a motion.
Seconded.
Motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Hearing none, motion carries. Is there any further business to come before the Ramsey County Home Rule Charter Committee? Hearing none, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn until the next meeting.
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
We stand adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.